This is so different from me because usually I'm doing the baptism and I got to run back there and get changed and come back out, and not used to coming right up and preaching after a baptism. But we're going to try it. They're going to, pardon? There's always the first time. Are you going to take a bath? Is that why you're dipping in there? Yeah. All right. Well, if you see Deanie back there splashing, just ignore her. All right, I need my picture PowerPoint. There you go, thank you. You guys can sit down. You're making me nervous standing back there. I'm not sure you're either going to flash mob me or run out the door or rush the stage. I'm not sure what you're going to do. How are we doing this week? Is everybody having a good week? Really good week, or just sort of a normal, everyday week? Well, I had an interesting day Thursday, and Monday and Tuesday I had prepared my sermon. It was all done. And then I had an hour-and-a-half phone conversation on Thursday. I came into work yesterday, and I wrote a whole new sermon yesterday morning. And this is the result of it. I will apologize in advance that there isn't a single Bible text in this sermon. But there's a lot of heart in it. There's a lot of personal issues in it. So, why are you living in Redding or in the Redding area right now? Have you thought about it? Why are you here? Your wife. Why do you do what you do for a living? Have you thought about why? Oh, to make money. I remember when I got out of high school, I didn't care what I did as long as I made a lot of money. That was my motivation for trying to find a career, was income. And quickly, because I wanted to get married. Why do you enjoy certain relaxation activities? Rudy, why do you like golf? Why do you do that? Why do you do what you do? Why are you a Christian? Have you thought about that? Have you given any deep thought as to why I'm a Christian? If you are a Seventh-day Adventist, why are you a Seventh-day Adventist? Because mom and dad were? Because that's what I know? Have you asked or thought about these questions? Why are you here today? What brought you here? What motivation? What drove you to come? The baptism? You thought there was food after lunch and you didn't have anything at home, so you came for food? Why? There's a lot of whys that we can ask in our lives, but we don't do it very much. Very infrequently do we really sit down and struggle with why. Why do I do what I do? Why am I what I am today? How have I gotten to this point, and where am I going? Maybe it's because every time as a child you ask mom and dad why, they said, because I said so. Why do I have to eat this? Because I said so. Why do I have to pick up my clothes? Because I said so. Why do I have to go to school? Because I said so. Now shut up and do it. Oh, maybe you didn't have a parent like that. But you know, as parents sometimes, we haven't asked the question why, and so when our children ask us, we don't have good answers, so we kind of brush them off a little bit. We give them a very shallow answer or no answer at all, and so we tend to diminish our children's inquisitiveness, and we also squash our own inquisitiveness, because thinking about the why is hard work. And one of the most frustrating things to me is superficial responses to the question why, that you have not thought about it. You just throw it out there just to get me to stop asking this stupid question. Maybe because of the squashing of our childhood whys, we stopped asking whys as adults, and we just kind of went through the flow. Well, why isn't easy? Why did God create the universe? I'm sure that there's multiple layers of the answer to that question, and I'm sure that most of us don't fully understand the whys. I've asked this next question I've been asked a number of times. Why did God create Satan? especially if he knows the beginning from the end. Why would he create Satan? Well, you know what? I don't want to spend too much time thinking about the whys because my head hurts. I get migraines and I get frustrated. Why did God create me? Do I have a purpose? Was there a reason that God created me? Do you know that had my baby brother, my older brother, not died in childhood, I wouldn't be here today. So I'm a replacement child for a child that my mother lost after childbirth, and she got pregnant, and I was the replacement child. Why me? Why not my brother? Why didn't he survive? This is a question that people who are in battle ask all the time. Why did they die, and why am I alive? What purpose was there for me to still continue on? And you know, especially those who've been through combat and those who have lost brothers and sisters in combat will wrestle with this for the rest of their lives. They will struggle with the question, why? Why me? Why not me? So why is not an easy question to ask, and it's a difficult process, because I do believe asking the question why is a process. It's not a singular question that we ask once and we have all the answers. So what is my purpose? And then the next question is, who or what determines that purpose? Is it me? Do I determine my future? Am I the one who determines my purpose in life? I go out and figure out what I want to do, who I want to marry, and I make it all happen, and by my decisions and my actions, I determine what my purpose is? Is it an accident? If you're an evolutionist, then you are an accident. You have no purpose. There is no purpose to the universe. There is no plan or reason for anything. It just happened. Make the best of it. Is it my circumstances? Is who I am and why I am here developed through the years because of my connections with other people, the schools that I went to, the children that I played with, the affiliations that I've had? Is that why I'm here? Is that my purpose? Is that how I determine my why? Or is there something bigger that determines purpose? Is there something outside of us that determines the why? I know that you're not really enjoying this because these are really hard things to think about. It's kind of like contemplating eternity. How many of you have sat and tried to imagine what eternity is like? It hurts your head, doesn't it? Just like trying to understand the cosmos. Why is kind of one of those questions similar to that, because it is so deep. It is so huge that a lot of times we just kind of, I don't want to think about it. I just don't want to think about it. Well, when I went to camp meeting, I took a book with me that was recommended. I think Wayne had told me about it, and another pastor had recommended it to me. And I took this book to camp meeting. In my long, late hours at night, I was reading. And the book is all about asking questions of why. Now, this is not a Christian book. It's not a religious book. It is a book about business. But when I read the book and started to think about the question of why, I started applying it to myself personally. And I started in my late night sitting at the front gate of Redwood Camp Meeting asking the question, why am I a Christian? Why am I a Seventh-day Adventist? And I was sitting there trying to understand, do I really know the answer to those questions? Or am I just kind of going through the motions and not really thinking about it? So I did start with why in my life, and I started to ask the question. And I think I know why I'm a Christian. Now, do you know why I say think? Because 30 years ago, I knew there wasn't a God. 30 years ago, I knew that this world evolved from nothing. 30 years ago, I knew a lot of things that I don't know now. So I have realized that I think I know because my understanding of who I am and why I am is developing, and it is constantly deepening as I allow that thinking to happen. So my why right now might be kind of superficial, but as I move forward, the why gets deeper as I understand why I am a Christian. And for everybody, for Tressie, the why she is baptized hopefully will develop and strengthen and deepen as she moves forward in her Christian walk. I hope the why becomes deeper for her. Because it's like roots going down into the ground. The deeper it goes, the more solid the plant is. And as we understand why God loves us and why God did what he did for us and why he calls us into his kingdom, and we start to understand these whys, it strengthens us. I also think I know why I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And I wrestled with that too. And I have thought many times, why am I here? You know, I wasn't raised in this church. In fact, the first connections with this church, I thought this church was pretty wacky, pretty weird. You guys do strange things, foot washing and stuff like that. Ooh. But over time, I kept asking the question, why? And I hope that my understanding of why is deeper than it was 20 years ago, 26 years ago when I got baptized. And I hope that my why is deepening in understanding of why I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And I would encourage you to ask yourself these questions too. Why are you a Christian? You see, because if you don't know the why, you're kind of unstable. You're easily changed and moved and shifted from your perspective. And unfortunately, one of the biggest problems today with our youth is that there is a lack of understanding of why they exist. And if you want to understand the problem with addictions, many people who get involved in addictions do not have a purpose in their life. They do not understand why. And so what they do is they find a way to compensate, to cause themselves to become medicated so that they don't have to think about the why or deal with the question. So I'm not suggesting that answering the question or delving into the why is easy, simple, or superficial or short. In fact, if you give me a quick answer, I'm going to doubt you've even thought about it. I think I knew why my previous church existed. It was 20 years ago that we went to Cleveland and we started this church. And it didn't start out like this. It took almost 7 years from the time I was there to get to this point where we had a community center. And I want to talk a little bit about that journey of understanding why, because when I was sent to Cleveland, I didn't know my why. I did not know my why. And I was trying all kinds of things. I was doing the what without understanding the why. And it created a lot of frustration in my life at the time because I couldn't understand why things weren't moving forward the way I thought they should. So I want you to understand that understanding the why was a process. I did not understand the why when I got there. I was sent to Cleveland. They gave me the instructions. Take your family, go to this place. There's no Seventh-day Adventist church with the four of you, your wife, your 2 children, and yourself. Start a church from scratch. Now, you would think on the surface that would be a cool thing, right? I get to, with a blank piece of paper, design church and do whatever I want. I don't have anybody there telling me what I can and can't do. Oh, that was power. Went to my head, too. After 4 years of designing this church from scratch and pulling together a group of 20-somethings, almost 40 of them, on a regular basis, I wanted to quit ministry. I was so frustrated. Because the church became all about us. It became all about playing church. It became all about appeasing a group of 20-somethings to make them happy. I wasn't happy. Oh, in fact, there were times I came home and I told my wife, I'm quitting. I'm done. This is too much. I can't handle this. But you see, I hadn't thought of my why yet. I didn't understand my why, and I didn't understand the why that this church was raised and existed. And it wasn't a conscious sitting down and saying, okay, we're going to write down paper why. It was going out and exploring who I was and trying to figure out the why through practical experience. That's how I did it. That's how it happened at the time. But once the why started to take shape, the church changed. Not immediately, it was slowly, and not without struggle and pain. But the church changed. We had moved into a storefront, and we moved out of a traditional church setting. And at that time, after about 7 years, a number of the congregation said, let's go build a church in the suburbs. Let's go move. We don't like this location. But my why had started to develop, and I said no. Because we are here for the people in this community. We are here to serve people who don't know Jesus and who need us. I refuse to move to the suburbs. We are not going there. Now, you know what happened next, don't you? There was a church split. Almost half of the people, and we were attending almost 120 people at that time, half of the people left because they didn't like the area, they didn't like being in a storefront, because church was all about them. But my why had started to develop, and I understood why we were there in that community. And I refused to give up my why. The why determined the what now. I knew what we needed to do because I understood the why. It also helped me develop a how we're going to do it. We're not going to do it the traditional way. These people don't understand tradition. They don't understand history. They don't have an order of service or a type of song. They don't understand, so my how changed. It was developed because of the why. Why are we here? And those who didn't like the why left. But the beauty of it was those who understood the why started coming in and replaced those who left. So we dropped from around 110 to 115 in worship attendance to 45, and within 2 years we were back up to 65, 70 people. But there was a dynamic change that happened because those who didn't understand the why decided that they were going to take their balls and go home. But those who understood the new why came in and reinforced and strengthened the church. Knowing the why helped us to make decisions for our future. It made the decision that we were going to be in a storefront. It caused a higher level of commitment because people understood the why. It was something bigger than us. It wasn't about just going through the motions anymore. It was about having a purpose that was bigger than any of us as individuals. And it did move people to a greater commitment of time and money. I don't know, I think I told you this, but you know, when we moved into the storefront, we never took an offering. Never. We had a tithe box that sat in the back of the sanctuary area, the worship area, and I taught all of my members that it's your responsibility to return to God your tithes and offerings. But I will never, ever, ever ask a visitor for money. Never. And in the 12 years that we were in that storefront, we never missed our budget. We never asked for money. Never. Because the people who understood the why were committed to it, and they were going to make it happen. So what was the why? We were there to serve our community. We were there to serve others, not ourselves. And that why developed after I started doing ministry in the park for the kids, and I saw the need. And I kept coming back to the church saying, you need to meet these kids. You need to see their lives. You need to understand that these kids live in such dysfunction and such brokenness that they need stability. They need help. And we learned, and after starting to minister some of the young people, they also needed food because they weren't getting fed. The public school systems fed them breakfast and lunch, and they went home and their parents didn't give them food because their parents weren't home. Their parents didn't care where their kids were. And in the summer, the only time they got a meal was if they went to the community rec centers that would serve them a mid-morning brunch once a day, 5 days a week. And so these kids did not get 3 meals a day. They got no meals on the weekends. And so we recognized the need, and not only were we ministering to the kids by playing with them and getting engaged, we started to give them food. We made sandwiches. We made popcorn. We did things. And the kids came because they were hungry. But we understood that our purpose was not about what we did for us, it was what we did for them. Is this ringing a bell with any of you that are in the Sabbath school class with Hal? Is this kind of connecting the dots with what the Sabbath school quarterly lesson is talking about? This didn't happen because of intentionality. We stumbled on it. It wasn't because I read a book of leadership and I went out and did it. I did it out of frustration that church wasn't satisfying to me. I wasn't seeing growth. I wasn't seeing mission. I wasn't seeing anything positive happening except a bunch of people coming and bickering all the time and complaining and getting in little cliques and keeping other people out. And that was happening at Walk of Faith. And I was so frustrated. My wife said, well, then don't do ministry for them. Go out in the community. And that's when it started to change for me. And so now our ministries were developed for the community. And everything we chose to do and the money we spent was for them. And we would have big events in the park. 700 people would show up, and we'd give away backpacks and school supplies to 2,000 kids. Every summer, every August, we would buy food, we would have music. We got a big 60-foot circus tent. It was 40 by 60 or 40 by, it was 40 by 60. And every summer, the community would come, and everybody within 3 miles knew who we were by name. They knew we were Seventh-day Adventists, and they loved us. The city gave us a recognition for community service because we were making a difference in the community in which we were in. And you know what? The church members rallied around it, and they showed up. I never had to ask for volunteers. We told them we're having a We Care event in the park on this Sunday, and they show up. They showed up early because one of the things that we got the tent for free as long as we put it up, and I had 30 guys show up, and we by hand put up this huge circus tent. We didn't have elephants. We did it by ourselves. We were feeding close to 500 families a week through our food bank, like Rudy's Bread of Life. 500 families a month we were feeding. Homeless people were coming and hanging out in our shelter, eating breakfast. Sometimes in bad weather, we'd leave the shelter open. We'd have coffee and donuts, and we'd just let them come in and hang out. We started a park ministry in which we had puppets, and we went out into the park for the kids, and we did kind of like Sabbath school lessons with puppets, and we would have snacks, and we would have games and crafts, and we would do this with the kids. We didn't do it every Sabbath, but in the summer, we would try to do 4 to 6 Sabbaths where we would go out and we would do it for the kids. We did a bike ministry in which some of the guys in our church went out and fixed bikes and taught kids how to put chains back on and how to change their inner tubes. Very simple stuff. But you know, when in the inner city, if a kid's bike breaks, you know what he does? He steals another one. He doesn't fix it. He left it lay on the side of the road and he goes and steals somebody else's. So we thought we would be doing a service if we could teach some of the kids how to do minor repairs. Stuff that dads should be teaching their kids, but they didn't have dads. So I got a bunch of guys to come out, and we built this little frame that could hold 4 bikes at a time, and we could put it up on a frame, and we could do 4 different bicycles. We could do maintenance. With chains, we replaced pedals, we replaced inner tubes, reflectors, seats. We bought the material. The guys showed up. While they were doing the puppets in one part of the park, the other guys were fixing bikes in another. I took a group of guys and I said, we've got a bunch of kids in our neighborhood that are out in the streets and aren't doing anything. Let's go out and play wiffle ball with them. How many of you remember playing wiffle ball in your backyard? I did that as a kid. I used to do that with my brothers and all the neighborhood kids. And I said, I'm going to go out and buy wiffle balls. We're going to get some snacks. And so there was a ball field a block away from our church. We showed up on a Sunday morning and we had 4 or 5 kids. The next week we had 40 because the word got out. And we had wiffle ball games in the summer. Every Sunday, we'd go over there and play wiffle ball with the kids. The kids loved it. And the church members did too, because we had a purpose. We were there for them. So the why helped us to define our community. It helped to define our primary activities. What is it we're going to do? Because we know what our community, we have to know the community's needs. And now we're going to define what we do. It determined how we spent our money and what the priority for our money was. And it determined how we spent our time. And it was invigorating to me. I enjoyed coming to church. I enjoyed the camaraderie as we worked for a common goal. Every Wednesday night, I would pick up the food from the food bank. I would be there early. A bunch of volunteers would show up and help me unload. We'd stock shelves. Then the rest of the volunteers would show up, and we would be there from 4 o'clock in the afternoon till almost 9 o'clock at night, working together every single Wednesday night. And it was energizing. It was not deflating. Every morning I would be there at 6 o'clock to start breakfast, and we would feed them breakfast Monday through Friday. When we started, we had 2 or 3. By the time I left, there was over 90 people every morning that was coming in for breakfast with us. On April 5th, 1992, at approximately 8 in the morning, Walmart lost its why. On that day, Sam Walton, Walmart's inspired leader, the man who embodied the cause around which he built the world's largest retailer, died. Soon after, Walton's oldest son, S. Robeson Walton, who succeeded his father as chairman of the company, gave a public statement. "No changes are expected in the corporate direction, control, or policy," he said. Sadly for Walmart employees, customers, and shareholders, that is not what happened. Because Sam Walton knew what the why of his company was, and he drove it throughout. But when Sam died, the why didn't get passed on. And anybody who has followed the history of Walmart understands that since Sam has died, Walmart has been in a lot of litigation, not only with employees, but with customers. If you have shopped Walmart before and after, you have noticed the changes in the stores. They have become much less attractive to go and shop at. There's been a huge shift. Now the book, I got this from the book, Start With Why. It was one of the examples that he used. That when you lose your why and you lose your direction, there are serious consequences. On approximately August 31st, 2014, Walk of Faith lost its why. Today, all the ministries that we started have been disbanded and the materials are being sold. They are not doing a single thing that they were doing when I was there. And the people who were once actively engaged in mission with a vision and with a purpose are now struggling with where to find a home. They're selling the building, and the congregation doesn't know where they're going to go. You see, I had an 1.5-hour conversation with my ex-head elder at Walk of Faith on Thursday, and he brought me up to date. Because the new person who replaced me did not understand the why, did not understand the driving factor of the why, and decided that the work that they were doing wasn't significant and it was too much work, and he slowly dismantled everything that we had set up after 15 years of work. And my ex-head elder, he's still the head elder there, but he's a good friend of mine, was telling me this in tears on the phone, saying it's all gone. Somewhere they lost their why. Now, I know it may sound arrogant to think that I was the why. I wasn't the why. I was the embodiment and the pusher and driver of the why. When I left, nobody picked it up. And maybe I didn't do a good job of training the people around me to understand the why. To be honest with you, I'm not sure I could have articulated this 3 years ago to you. I don't know that I could have articulated to them 3 years ago. This is part of the understanding of the growth of the why as you struggle with understanding the why. Did Walk of Faith serve a particular why in its community? I believe it did, and I believe it was successfully growing. But when another person came in and did not understand the why or the purpose and shifted everything, suddenly the bottom fell out. I say this to you because businesses fail when they lose their why, but so do churches. Now, churches sometimes come together for a temporary why. And I've seen this before, and I think that it's happened here at Palisadro. In talking to Hal recently and asking him, we actually had this conversation over this book and talking about the history of Palisadro and the why, and Hal was reminiscing when this church started, the why was to build this building. And it was a defining factor to get this church up. And there was an awful lot of energy and effort put in by a lot of people to get this building and everything put together. And so the why at that time was a compelling driving force. And I think if you talk to Hal or any of the people who were here at the beginning, they may in their minds have a why Palisadro was started and why it was placed here, and they may be able to answer some of those why questions. But somewhere along the way, the why was lost. Now, I'm going to suggest that when the journey was started about, 15 years ago, a new why was developed. And your church was the most vibrant it's been since it started through that why. You existed for a reason. You had a purpose. But a new leader came in, and something changed. And the why was lost, or at least clouded over or set aside. And what happened after that? What happened to the trajectory of the church? Did attendance start to diminish? Did excitement start to change? Involvement start to change? So here we are, a new pastor comes in and there's a blip up. But unless we figure out our why, that blip up is going to diminish soon too. On September 6th, 2014, I arrived at Palisadro looking to start anew. Excited to begin a new why with a new group of people. As of August 20th, 2016, I cannot tell you why this church exists. That doesn't mean there isn't a why. It means that I don't know what it is. And I do not know that there is an overarching why that every one of you would agree on as to why this church exists. And herein lies part of the issue that I'm talking about, is that without us having a clear understanding of why we're here, why does Palisadro exist at this time? Without understanding that, without developing that, without promoting that, we're kind of wallowing around in sort of a pseudo-church mentality. I'm not even suggesting that I have the answer to the question. But I am suggesting that it's pretty hard to lead when you don't know where you're going. So I bought the book for all the elders. I asked them to read it, and we're going to discuss it. And I want them to help me understand, why does Palisadro exist? And who determines that? Is it by vote of majority? Or should we be seeking God's will and asking Him, God, why did you put this church in existence here at this time? What is our context? Who is our ministry group? Who's our community? And what is it that you have called us into existence for? It is God's church, and it is His purpose. It is our need to discover that purpose. I believe that this church does have a purpose. I just don't know what it is. I'd like to, because I think it would be similar, at least, to what happened with the journey. Now, the journey was the what, not the why. The journey and what you did in the journey was the what. It was the action that came out of a why. Now, if I'm correct, and you'll have to correct me because I'm dealing with history, I wasn't here. Shortly before you started the journey, did you go through a book called The Purpose-Driven Church? What is the Purpose-Driven Church implying? That it helps you find your why. Just a different way of going about it, though, right? But the purpose or the why of a church has to be bigger than its activities. It has to be bigger than that. And it has to be an action. It can't just be an attitude. You see, somebody pointed out to me that the why of Palisadro is faith, love, hope, grace. No, that's the how. That's the how. It's not the why. So I want you to think, and I want you to pray. And I would like this church to find its why, and for all of us to come together so that we can start defining our community that we're here to serve, that we can start coming together in a unified way so that we can be all that God wants us to be. Because God did not call this church into existence to fail. God did not call this church into existence just so that we could have a party room for ourselves. He called this church into existence for some big things. But we've got to figure out why. And then we can understand what. I think you've pretty much got the how down. I wouldn't question the how. In fact, I like the how. And whatever it is your why is, your how is pretty much set. We don't have to spend a lot of time on that. But if we could figure out the why, I got a feeling the what will be clearer. And once we have the what, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there will be a concerted effort from everybody to pitch in, to be a part. One of the things in the book that he lists is Apple. How many of you are Appleites? You know, can you think of any other company where people will stand in line for 2 days for a new product to come out? These people are dedicated, aren't they? The people who have bought into the why of Apple. You see, there are other people who make iPhones, and some would argue they're just as good. But why is it people are so dedicated to Apple? And he argues in this book that Apple has a very clear why it's in existence. And the people who are faithful understand that why, they agree with that why, and they're all in. And they'll stand for 2 days in line to buy an Apple phone. And any new technology that Apple comes out, I want to be that kind of church where people understand the why and they're wanting to be a part of this church because they get it. So my request is that you would pray for your leadership, that we would understand the why of Palisadro, that we can clearly find out, experience what God is wanting this church to become, and then that we can promote it in such a way that we could build unity, that we can build harmony, and that we can all start rowing the boat in the same direction. That's what I'm hoping for. Have you ever been in a boat where people are rowing in 4 different directions? It just doesn't move forward. I want to get us all paddling in the same direction in that canoe. So please, think about why Palisadro exists. Think about why you're a Christian. Think about why you're a Seventh-day Adventist. Give yourself a brain cramp this week. But I think it's worthwhile. I think it's a worthwhile exercise. And I think in the long run, God will bring clarity through that process. So let's sing our closing song.